Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way.
Is it okay if I kick your boss's ass? That won't affect your workplace chemistry, will it?
One man's toxic sludge is another man's potpourri.
All right, who did this? I'm not mad. I just want to know who did it so I can punish them.
When I get to the workplace, I like to fuck shit up.
Welcome to Let's Break Up, Toxic Workplace Stories, where weekly we interview people from around the world reflecting on their experiences in toxic workplaces.
Sharing lessons learned and providing a safe, supportive environment to share your stories with us and everyone else that may also be experiencing a similar situation.
Hosted by me, Nicola,
and me, Gina.
Both with many years of experience in the corporate world and now deep diving into the toxic workplace culture.
Each week we will provide tips and ways to identify and overcome some of the challenges associated with toxic workplaces. So settle in and relax.
As you join us in today's episode,
let's jump straight in and see where this journey takes us. Hi, Nicola.
Gina.
Are you so excited that this is our very first episode?
If you had told me a year ago that we were going to be doing a podcast together, I would have absolutely said that wouldn't have even happened.
I think I would agree with you.
Okay. But we'll get into why, I guess.
We'll get into why. And just for anyone, like the 3 people who might actually listen to our first episode, my voice is like, I know, that would be awesome. But my voice is not normally like this. I have like a weird laryngitis kind of thing. And I think on the intro that Nicola recorded, I probably sound like I
died.
Died and was like resuscitated. Yeah. All right. Well, Nicola, why don't you tell us who you are?
Well, okay. So I am Nicola. I have got a history in OSHA. I've only ever done OSHA, or occupational health and safety. I've got an MBA and a diploma of creativity and over 15 years of OSHA experience. I'm also currently studying because, you can't.
Because you're crazy. You're a crazy person. Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
I'm currently doing a Master of Laws, so I'm not quite sure what I'm doing with my life really, because I'm focusing on OSHA and employment relations. So this makes it very pertinent to the stuff we talk about. I'm originally from South Africa and I live in New Zealand. I don't know about you, but I've experienced a number of toxic workplaces for all different reasons. And I'm sure we'll cover a lot of those as we kind of move through the process. I'm also a single mum and I like to be super creative. I don't know about you.
Well, I'm Gina and I am creative in sort of a more non-traditional way. I have love for product development. I've been doing that for, I think, 18 years, could be a little bit longer. And currently I'm working in executive and C-suite roles. And I have for the past, I don't know, like 10 years or something. I'm also 43. So that's why don't let my chin acne fool you. So I'm currently a COO of a company that we work with big companies, like, huge companies, international brands, and we help them navigate custom private label items. My first job out of college was on Wall Street, was there for about 5 years. I am a native New Yorker and I wear that badge with pride. I was born in the Bronx, grew up in the Bronx, and I'm Italian, so you guys can do the math. And for me, I had been in toxic workplaces previous to the one that you and I met at. I always thought it was like a term for someone who is weak, like, oh, they can't stand it. But as I've grown older, I've been able to spot things quicker. And I also realized that I was in a lot of toxic workplaces, just stuff that was inappropriate. And partially because I think I might have been the day and age, like the late 90s or something. But I'm also a single mom by choice. I have a beautiful little daughter, and Nicola and I have a lot in common. So, yeah. So tell us, Nicola, why did we decide to start this podcast?
When we started, it's really funny because when we started talking about it, I think it was just going to be the natural progression of what we were talking about. And I think a lot of it was around solidarity as well, because, toxic workplaces are just becoming so increasingly more a thing, commonplace.
And I think everyone's like experiencing it, like, and even if like myself, like you didn't realize you were in one, but then it's becoming more of a commonplace word right now, and you're hearing it more, and people are willing. I think the willingness to talk about it is really important, because what we're trying to do here is share our stories and then have other people share theirs, so that we can create like a safe place. Like, we're not going to judge you. You're going to hear our stories, and we did a lot of things right, a lot of things wrong, probably more wrong than right. But we, you don't learn or grow unless you make mistakes. So we want to like have this safe platform so that we can bear witness to your stories, and hopefully give people a place to just let it all hang out.
I know. And, I think that safe platform as well, because the minute we started talking about it and we started talking about it with other people, the amount of stories that have come through are just phenomenal. Everybody seems to have a story.
Everybody does, whether they realize it right now or not. Everybody has a story. And nothing is worse or better than the others. They're all equally traumatic,
And I think it's kind of recovering in from that trauma as well. Is, we're going to talk a lot about how to overcome toxic workplaces, how to identify toxic workplaces. Is it you that's the toxic person in your toxic
and
workplace?
that could actually be, because sometimes I'm like, I'm the common denominator. Did I F this up? Like, what, I mean, that's a very valid point. So, and I think for me personally, I'm willing to point the finger at myself and take full responsibility. Like, if I messed up, I don't mind being like, yep, you're right. That was a like brain fart. I get it. I messed up. You're right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think in that way we're quite similar as well, where it's like we can take criticism, like tell us if you, and we can grow and change and do something different, because that's the only way you're going to develop as a person, is if you take that criticism on and you reflect on it. And every so often, maybe the criticism isn't quite correct, as we will probably find out in today's episode.
Sure. So you and I met via a toxic workplace, which we both, I have to say, I realized it was toxic sooner than you, but I don't know though. I think you were so embedded in the way everything was, and we'll get into that, and how you can kind of wind up in a toxic workplace without even realizing you're there. And then, long story short, we were both fired in due time. We'll get into it. We'll get into our breakup stories. And I ended up reaching out to Nicola after I was fired, and I was like, hey, so guess what? I was fired too. And we just kind of started talking. And then we actually met recently in Vegas.
That was cool.
And
it
was a lot of fun.
Told me a year ago that we were going to meet in Vegas, I would have said
that out of everyone at our toxic workplace, that it would be you and me who met in person. Yeah. I would have been like, how? Yeah, why?
No way.
I know.
Well,
all right. So
I think it's great, because at least now we're friends. So.
Well, yeah. Of course. Duh.
Let's kind of get into it, right? So
yeah.
Before you started at our toxic workplace, and I thought, let's just maybe caveat this as well with, we do swear a lot, and we're not going to hold back just because we're having a podcast.
Ladies,
please, if you're gonna wear your pearls, I suggest you take those off, babes.
Or just clutch them a lot, because that's like very Southern, and I like it.
Oh, so clutchy. And I think the other thing as well is, for anonymity, we're not going to say people's names. That's ridiculous. We're not going to say what business it is. We're not going to talk about things like that. We're going to talk about, the culture and the environment and particular situations that we observed. It's not that we're going, on a pitchfork.
And it's not to shame anyone. I think that's important to say. And it's not to point fingers. It's just we want people to listen and feel heard and learn from the stories we provide to you. So, let's get into it though.
So before you started, you were talked up weeks before you started, how amazing you would be. And you've come from these other organizations.
But I kind of was.
Well, we know that. But then you get things done. But for me, looking back now, a pink flag was that someone was actually being demoted for you to come into your role. And I raised the issue early on and I said, this is an issue of psychological safety. Do you think this is going to damage the trust within the team? And how might this impact their mental health? And it was just glossed over. Nobody really gave a shit. There was zero change management process in place. There was lack of transparency and there was zero thought for the person's mental health with you coming in.
Right.
So,
and I didn't know any of that. And I think looking back now, that should have been a pretty big red flag because I assumed probably stupidly that they were a company and their revenue was whatever amount of dollars. It was a decent amount. It was a healthy revenue. Doesn't mean it was the profit though. No. I assumed that they had changed management, procedures in place and it would have been announced and the people who needed, whatever. Long story short, that did not happen and things were not communicated. And I think at the heart of this toxic workplace, you were doing the marketing, I was doing the product development and supply chain, which means importing and all of that. And I think, why don't you tell everyone how you got, initiated into the company or hired?
So I'd actually started out as a customer back many, many years ago, probably in about 2018. So I had really strong brand loyalty. I ended up later, because I run a blog as well, and later I ended up promoting the products, which at the time I did believe were the best. In 2020, I reached out to kind of improve the promotion process because it wasn't great. Like we weren't getting, as promoters for the product, we weren't getting the products until like months after they were released. So I said, there's ways we can improve this. Can I help? So I started in a contract role back then and kind of at the height of COVID, right? Remote working, super easy. And it kind of grew from there. When I left, I was head of an entire department, much like you were. And, the pink flags that I'd identified throughout my time there really only became clear red flags once I left. And I think only once we connected was I really kind of shocked as to how I was oblivious to those red flags. What about you? Tell us about your joining.
So I was formally hired. I interviewed for the position. And I think some of the red flags for me would have been the amount of, it wasn't a big company. The amount of interviews they made me do and discussions before they even said, we're going to be offering you this job was kind of extensive. So, because I had a call with the CEO first. From the call, it was a Zoom interview with, I guess, most of the bigger team players, like executives. And from there, it was several other Zoom meetings with the COO and the CEO, just kind of talking about certain things, the potential change in organizational chart. And they actually had me import something for them using my own importers because I was like, let me show you how easy it should be. So I didn't mind doing that. And that shipment came in totally smooth. So it was not until after all of that was done that I was offered the position.
So
and I was, I
almost had to do a test run.
it was like I was like, you know, I don't know. I mean, looking back on it, I probably should have been like, they're using me. You know, they're using me. Like, I don't know. I think for some positions, that's something that you should do. Like, for instance, like if you're a creative like designer in the graphic space, like come up with something or have like, you know, your portfolio ready to see. Or if you're in marketing, maybe you have like, you know, a faux marketing launch. Like, I think that's fine. But in a position like mine, like, why do I have to do all of that to begin with? But anyway,
You know,
and
it's weird that you say that because I didn't realize that you were doing things before you were even hired.
I was.
Because that would have been awful for the change management of the person who was being demoted.
Well, that was part of the problem. They had nobody who was dedicated to doing imports. And it was like a whole bunch of random people, like the COO who had no idea how to import, you know, shit from shit, was getting involved. There was too many cooks in the kitchen because nobody had the real experience to like do something smooth. So anyway, so I needed the job at the time because COVID had really affected the current position I was at, and my hours were being cut and so on and so forth. So I needed something, and I knew I wasn't going to leave the company I was with, but I was like, maybe, you know, to me, it was a consultancy. I always knew I was going to leave. I thought I'll stay here a year, and then 4 months. I would not be able to handle a year. Anyway, all right. So you want to talk about a couple of specific stories?
Oh, for sure. So, you know, I'd been there for quite a while, right? And, you know, one of the things that really irked me wasn't even a red flag at the time, but just really irked me because I was like, this shouldn't be how things are, is fireable offenses were just glossed over. And it was because the CEO didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. And I'm like, that's not how business works. This is a fireable offense. Like, we have to let this person go. And then we're like,
it was basically stealing.
hey?
It was basically stealing.
Yeah, the person that said fireable offense was stealing. And yeah, just glossed over it.
And not let go.
And not let go. I also worked massive hours, absolutely massive hours. And I was always told, the strap line was always, there is no expectation for you to always be available. But if I wasn't always available, something would happen that needed to be fixed. And I would end up having to work extra hard to fix it. And coupled with shit like you'd wake up to a plethora of messages saying, I know it's your day off, but hey, I know you're sleeping, but, and like that was just consistent. You wake up to like I don't know about you, but tons of messages on a message.
Slack was overly used. It's a great tool, but it was relied on so much and there was like important files being shared on Slack, and why? Just send it via email. It's much like safer that way, in my opinion. Maybe I'm old school, but yeah.
Yeah, but when you tell people though that there's no expectation for you to do these long hours, and then there's just this constant barrage of messaging about, oh, you know, this needs to get done, or has this been looked into? It's like, oh, mate, come now.
Yeah, and but I think part of that was they were always on the offense because they didn't have a knowledgeable pool of employees. So we'll get into that later, but and it's not really the employee's fault in a lot of ways, because they were hired thinking they could do X, Y, and Z, and the fact is they lacked any qualifications. So we'll get into that further,
We'll get into that a little bit later as well.
Yeah, but yeah, in terms of like your amount of hours, it was like you never slept, and knowing you now and having known you during that time, you're like a completely different person. You're like lighter. You don't look so like drained all the time. Yeah, it was terrible. But I identify with that because I also changed. Like I changed, like I think for like a month it was okay, and then my partner and my daughter's nanny started saying like what's going on with you, like and then after I ended up leaving, my partner was like, I was almost going to leave you because you were like a miserable bitch. And I was like, yep. And like I would see him at the gym in the mornings and I'm getting up like super early to get that in before the barrage of messages come. And I would see him at the gym, and he'd like look at me and say like, hey, what's up, or whatever. And I would just be like, I'm miserable. And I just have to turn around and walk away from him because I would start crying. I know. And then my daughter's nanny was like, you're just not present. Like I would be talking to you and it would be like a blank wall because I was like a mile a minute, like thinking like, oh my God, is there an issue that I forgot to talk to somebody about? Am I going to get in trouble for saying this? Like there was just so much, like, it was like a fear culture. For me, I don't do well with micromanaging. And I think micromanaging breeds micromanaging.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened. You know, because I'm now the COO of a company, and I'm just like, if you're doing it and you're getting the work done and I see the results, we don't even need to talk. Yeah. Like, you know, so anyway,
we're good.
yeah, I'm like, just let me know when it's done. Do you want to talk about how you were broken up with? Yeah.
Oh my God.
Let's break up. Did they call you and say, let's break up? We know we're a toxic workplace.
Pretty much. It was really bizarre. It was really, really bizarre. And like, we'll kind of come into a bit more of the reason a little bit later, but essentially how it unfolded was there had always been delivery issues around delivering product, and you know, just nobody was sorting that out. And I was really grateful that you were there because, you know, our teams were really working far better together because it was just easier to deal with. And so we had planned for months, well, I had planned for months and my team had planned for months to deliver a suite of digital products to support the delivery of a really cool, fun tool. And because of the delivery issues, it was late and we only ended up getting the product photos just like days before the launch. So I was working, it was a long weekend. I think it was Easter weekend, maybe. I can't remember. But I was working about 18 hours a day for like 3 days, probably more. And the launch was meant to be on Monday, and I was let go on my birthday, which was the Saturday, which is also ironic because looking back now, it was so toxic. I can't even describe it to you. Like, it was insanity. I was supposed to be having the day off on my birthday. I don't know what it was, but I had this ominous feeling and woke up at like 3 a.m. my time to a barrage of messages. And I logged in thinking, okay, well, I can just get some of these things done. I'm up anyway, right? Let me just get things done. And I suddenly couldn't access anything. Literally couldn't access anything. Couldn't access my emails, couldn't access like our chat group. I couldn't access anything. And so I sent a text saying, hey, I'm really struggling to log on. What's the issue here? And I was told there was a security issue.
That's what they told everyone else as well within the company.
Security issue.
Yes.
And I was like, a security issue? Like, what? Have we leaked information? Has someone hacked us? Like, I was like,
this is not, and also there's like nothing like patented. We're not doing like high tech shit. Like, it's if there was a legitimate security breach, it would be like not the biggest deal in the world. Like, it wouldn't matter.
So I'm messaging the CEO and I'm like, what's going on? Is everything okay? Like, everything is fixable, right? Everything is fixable. I'm like, it's fixable. Don't stress. She's like, oh, I'm going to have to ring you soon. And I'm like, okay, cool. It's fixable.
False pretenses.
Is fixable. So I was like, it's cool. Everything's manageable. Don't worry about it. Because that was my thing, right? Is I could fix anything. And so I got the call from the CEO, and I'm not kidding you. She spent the first 10 minutes of the call crying.
Which I feel like is very emotionally manipulative.
Oh, for sure. And I'm like, I thought there had been some sort of hack. I thought someone had died. I thought the business was being sold. Like, I literally had no idea what was going on. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, you've got to take a deep breath. Like, let's deep breath together. Everything is fixable. Like, let's break it down into chunks. Like, let's work out what the issue is and break it down into chunks. And then through the garbled sobs, she's like, we have to let you go. And I'm like, what? Like, I was like, I'm sorry, me. I'm like, wait, why? What? Why? She couldn't articulate what it was. Like, so through this really garbled sobbing. It came out, and we'll come into why this happened. But I had made a recording of someone, we were talking on Zoom, and I'd made a recording of it. But it was an issue that it was something you couldn't do in a particular state in the USA. The CEO then claimed that I'd never told them about it, where I'd made it emphatically clear that I had. We knew that the CEO knew, but wasn't being forthcoming with the fact that they did. So it was just horrible. Again, I said it was something that was fixable, like, let's deal with it, we can work it through. They then claimed that, and to this day, I legitimately have no idea or understand what actually transpired. Because one of the first question I asked was, how do I hand over stuff to my team? Like, I can't access anything. So how do I hand stuff over to make sure that
they did the same thing to me. They don't give a shit. They think they got it all under control without you.
I know, but I'm like, I haven't stolen information. I haven't done anything that has damaged the business. I haven't done anything that damages other people, essentially. And you're telling me I can't hand things over to my team to make it easier for them? Like, what?
Nope.
So then they went down this rabbit hole of, and the other managers look up to you, and you'll still be my best friend, and we'll still be friends long term. And I was, as I say, confused and so hurt, because I genuinely thought that this group of people were my friends. And I had a friend at my house at the time who listened in on the conversation, because I'd taken the conversation in my office. And when I was done, when I put the phone down, because I was so shocked, like, literally this was left field, right? Like, this had come out of nowhere. And put the phone down, and I just burst into tears. And they came in and they said they've never heard such an unprofessional way of breaking up with someone in their lives. And they come from a notoriously toxic working environment. And they said they've never seen something dealt with so badly. And that the entire conversation, I was measured, thoughtful with my responses. I didn't get angry. I wasn't upset. I was confused for sure, but I was really measured about my responses. And they said, your professionalism overshone the unprofessionalism that came from the CEO, and that it was actually the most disgusting thing they'd ever heard. And I was like, damn. But there was actually a lot of disgusting things that I heard from the CEO's mouth just over the 4 months I was there. Like, not in relation to letting someone go, but just in general. And I think also, like, the general nature of the business was extremely exploitative of sure, we can get
of a demographic that is already vulnerable.
Oh, for sure.
And it started really bothering me towards like 2 months, because I was like, wait, I don't feel good about this. Like, I don't think that this is cool.
But it's caveated in this, and we'll talk about it later as well, is this toxic positivity, right? Like, we're doing
that you have to have, or else you're a horrible human being and you have no redeeming qualities.
But, you know, for me, with my breakup, I think the thing that hurt the most was I genuinely believed that these people were my friends. But no, their alliance was actually to the business, and I was just collateral damage. And
because we'll get into why that people are, I'm sorry I cut you off, but it's like, I just wanted to point this out, like that I think because it ended up being so cultish, that people cared about the business only and the CEO. Yeah. And that's not healthy, because they put the CEO on a pedestal, and, you know, that person was so amazing for what they're doing. But meanwhile, it was actually an exploitation of an already vulnerable demographic, in my opinion.
Oh, sure. I totally
targeting them.
Yeah. And, you know, like, my marketing repertoire with the organization, we hit some really amazing milestones because of the work that myself and my team did. You know, we had, like, if you had a problem and you wanted to have extra revenue or extra sales, we made it happen. And we didn't just make it happen. We kicked the ball out of the park. you know?
And most of the actual products were not done well.
No, like some of
They
the
were
stuff-
very, very subpar, especially for a retail company that is trying to get to a more luxurious place.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, I know a little bit of the backstory of how you were broken up with because it was actually my team that made it happen.
And we
so-
will get into a bit more of the details behind that as well, because that was toxic too.
Yeah, that started out like just the whole thing, how it started out. But essentially what happened is somebody asked me to mention something to the COO in one of my one-on-one meetings. And as a manager and a direct report is saying, hey, I just want you to say this to the COO. I felt like I had to, but I wasn't ingrained in the business yet. So I didn't know much. This was like within my first month. So I just simply mentioned it. And I said, this direct report just wanted me to make sure you knew X, Y, and Z. And the COO said, well, unless we have actual proof, I can't really do anything with it. So I said that to my direct report and I figured that was the end of it. And I'm actually surprised that you actually got a call from the the CEO, because they usually made the COO do all the dirty work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like,
but it took me months. Like it took me months I was so depressed because I wasn't just mourning the loss of, a job, but I was pretty much canceled. I went from being ingrained in absolutely everything all day, every day, 24 hours a day, to having absolutely no purpose, like zero purpose.
do you mean zero purpose within that organization
No,
or
just like zero purpose, because my whole identity had been wrapped up in.
Well, you were there longer, so that like cult-like mentality was already like in there with you. But by the time I reached out
was
to
also ingrained in it as well.
Yeah. And one of the company's like, values or the culture that they create is the company comes before everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think that says a lot. It's like, so you're really not employees that we value. The company comes first.
Because realistically, and this may sound harsh or not, I don't know, I wasn't even able to retort. I wasn't allowed back on Slack to prove the CEO already knew.
Right.
There was no retort.
Yep.
There was no,
because
can we investigate this? Because this is not actually how it happened. There was none of that.
I was there to do a job. That's the way that I work. I'm there to save this company money. I'm there to get their products in line with what they think they are and to create better products and figure out their delivery issues and their supply chain issues. So I didn't care. I was like, this is none of my business. Like, I know that sounds harsh, but I was like, I don't care about this. I have so much fucking work to do. I don't have the time. Like, I don't care and I don't have the time. But yeah, I mean, I feel like your breakup and my breakup were very, very similar. Just the actual minutia were different. The details were different, but I always had that barrage of the messages, whether it's from Slack or overseas vendors WhatsApping me at all hours of the night. And, I'm good at what I do. So I was able to get all of them to start emailing and putting everybody just like on a specific, these are the times we're available. If it's a super urgent thing, you could WhatsApp me. And I'm sure all of that has fallen. All of the good things that I did, I'm sure they're all fallen by the wayside. Like, anyway, the company as a whole was really like unprofessional. And I don't know, like for me, they just called me. So it's kind of hard because there were so many things that happened prior to the actual breakup. But essentially the breakup, I'll just bring you to the end of it because I think we'll get into it further. But the COO and I had a video call, and she messaged me and she said, I'm going to call you instead. And I just was like, okay. There had been something that had been going on within my team that was really dysfunctional. One of my direct reports was essentially like gossiping about me and how horrible I was. and saying that I was going against all the core values, and that I make her feel unsafe, and like all of these things. But like at the end of the day, it was like, I don't have time for, like, I don't coddle people. You're either gonna step up to the occasion and get it done the way I do, or I'm not here to pet your mental health. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not. If you have a problem, I have an open door policy. I'm not going to judge you, but my job here is to get this stuff done. And that's your job here, especially with product development. Because we have deadlines, and there was also never a sense of urgency from my team. And I kept trying to get them to work a little bit quicker. And they were just so resistant to it, because you have to like plan, like with retail, you have to plan like 6 months out. And we were lucky if we planned 2. It was ridiculous. Anyway,
which then impacted our team, and
it was like a massive dysfunction. And I remember towards the end of my tenure there, I was getting really frustrated, and I would talk to my therapist weekly, and she was like, this is common for companies that they know they need to change, but they won't, because they're so comfortable in their dysfunction. There's like a safety there because they don't know anything else. And somebody like me, who has no affiliation to the company ever, didn't even know they existed prior to taking the interviews, comes in and just, I don't mean to sound like an asshole, but I'm good at what I do. Like, I am a good product development person. I'm good with operations. Like, I'm good at what I do, just like Nicola is. And it was hard. But anyway, so the COO said, I'm going to call you instead. And the next thing I know, like, there's this other woman from this like shoddy outside HR company that I've never met, never spoke to. She has no idea who I am. And the first words out of the COO's mouth were, "This can go one of 2 ways."
you.
And I was like,
Excuse
are
me?
you threatening me? Like, it sounded like a threat. But at this point, I already knew that they were letting me go, even though the day before I had screenshotted my direct reports, like really verbally, like rude shit that she sent to me, and said, like, I don't have any choice but to resign from this role because this is not going to get fixed. So anyway, they fired me, even though I said I would like to resign, and then they gave me severance. So that was like, cool. You don't know what the hell you're doing. I just said, I have put in writing, I want to resign. But because you guys don't know your ass from your elbow from a business sense, they never had to give me severance. I didn't need severance. I wasn't entitled to it. But once they needed to be like, no, you don't quit, we fired you. That's different. So anyway, so she said, yeah, this can go one of 2 ways. And I was like, okay. And then, she's like, I've learned so much from you. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Cause you basically knew shit. You knew fuck about shit. I mean, it was so ridiculous. And she's like, but, we're going to have to let you go. And I was like, okay, is this because of the person who's the direct report, what happened with her that I screenshotted? And this HR lady was like, we don't need to get into the specifics. And I was like, actually, I think we do, because A, you're entitled to an exit interview.
For sure.
And B, I can ask questions, like, also, like, maybe it was a valid thing that I did wrong, which in this case it wasn't. These people were just not my people. And I would need to know that information to do better in my next role. Like, I think that you owe that to someone. And then, at the end of the day, the COO was like, you just basically went against all of our core values, which we'll get into those, but they were all like one-liners from Dr. Seuss books. The places like you'll go. Our number one core value is, the places you'll go. Or green eggs and ham. Or Sam I am. And like, yeah, it's like, I mean, it was, and they all like contradicted each other. So that's a whole different mess. And I think that for me, the breakup, I felt like they used me. They got me for what I was worth. They got my vendors. They got some of the designers that I've used, and we made the product really good. Now the product's back to shit, and that was it. And by the end of my tenure there, I was literally, I remember I was sitting in my office and I had like this book and I just like kept slamming it on my desk because I was so frustrated, and I would like scream into my like hand. And I also had like this horrible rash that
Oh my God.
I have pictures of it.
Ew.
It was called seborrheic dermatitis, and I was on antibiotics. It looked like I had like either leprosy or like a really bad case of like a cold sore. And I was on antibiotics for 2 months to get rid of it. I've never had it before in my life, and I have not had it since. So I feel like you guys need to do the math on that.
I fell into a deep depression because,
Yeah.
not one person checked up on me to see how I was doing.
Except for me.
Well, except for you when you were fired.
Yeah, and it was a couple of weeks after, because I was like, you know what, maybe like, because for me, it was like I felt really shitty. I felt used, and I was angry. I was like, can I sue them? Like, I was talking to a lawyer friend of mine, and he's like, you don't really have the right to sue them. I just felt like they took me for everything I was worth, and I was fucking angry.
I was
And like
angry.
they didn't recognize how powerful I can be if they just let me shine.
Yeah.
And they do not allow their employees to shine.
No, they
ever. They don't.
You can't shine brighter than the CEO or the COO.
No. And it was, my feelings were hurt just like yours. Because it's like, out of everyone, you and I probably had the most, well, I know we did. We had the most corporate experience in like real companies, not like a little like startup that's not funded.
Okay, so I think, one of the things that we're going to talk about, I think, today is, what is traditional workplace toxicity? And I know that you went and found kind of 16 signs of a toxic workplace, according to Fast Company, which actually were really valid. And I really enjoyed reading through them. So I thought it was a really good idea to maybe go through each one of them and kind of highlight how the toxic organization that we met in, how those lined up with the toxicity that is kind of commonplace in a toxic work environment. Well, our next episode, now that I think we're going to cut this episode in 2 parts, because it's going to be,
I think 3, but
like 3 parts. So we'll have part 1, kind of how we met. Part 2 is going to be all about 16 traits of toxic workplaces. And then I'm guessing episode 3, that toxic positivity and that MLM cultish vibe. I think the first, let's say few episodes are going to be pretty juicy, because I think we're pretty candid people, and we're not going to hold back on, the experiences that we've had. Yeah.
I mean, I think, the one workplace that I think I want to talk about is, it's a little juicy, though they're no longer in existence anymore, but there was some inappropriate relationships happening, and it's interesting. And I know that you have your own sort of bindle of juicy things to talk about. All right. So
well, that brings us kind of to the end. And, we really want to thank you for joining us on part 1 and part 2 of our first episode.
And possibly part 3.
Possibly part 3. It really feels like an accomplishment, I think, getting this first one done and dusted. So we can be proud of each other, I think.
Yeah. So if you enjoyed like these 4 or 5 or 7 episodes all in one, we would love it if you could like and subscribe to our podcast. And side note, leaving a review also helps, and it lets everyone else know that we don't suck too bad. Just a little bit, but
it also helps
not
us
that
create
bad.
more, right? It helps us create more because it shows that there's an interest in the topic and in toxic workplaces. You can find us on Instagram and LinkedIn, and this will also go up on YouTube as well. And for those of our listeners who do better with reading, we also will have a full script available with closed captions on YouTube as well. And we welcome.
And for those who just want to see a 43-year-old woman with incredible acne, here you are. I feel like I'm like a cross between like a Dr. Pimple Popper episode and this one.
All right, so you're welcome to reach out to us on our LinkedIn page or our Instagram page over at Toxic Workplace Pod, and let's break up toxic workplace stories. If you would like to be interviewed, we welcome you to share your story because we are all about solidarity. And if you're listening today, it would be really cool if you could screenshot and share it to IG, and we would love to give you a shout out on an upcoming episode.